Okay, I think I'm doing this right. I don't know. Someone will have to tell me if they can see me at all. But I'm trying. Cool. All right. Let's see if I can get a link posted. I'm not sure if I know how to do that yet. Anyways, this will just be fun. This will just be for fun. So welcome everybody. First live stream. I wanted to talk a little bit about the topic that we were talking about yesterday, which is this idea of stories. And Brett said at the top of StreamYard, there's a way to add it. Not sure. I'll figure it out in a second. Or maybe it's just the link itself. Oh, just the web link? Oh, maybe let's try that. All right, we'll see if that'll allow anybody. Yeah, I might be a millennial, but I also am not super great when it comes to technology because I like to stay away. Oh, yes, it worked. How cool is that?
Boom.
Nice, Brett. Cool.
Yeah, now if you have another window with YouTube open, you can go to that window.
Yeah.
And then go and look in the chat and you'll see the 3 dots. When you highlight over that web link, you'll see on the right side.
You can pin it?
Yeah, when you click those 3 dots, it says pin it, and then that way it'll always be at the bottom of the chat. You don't have to keep reposting it like Ron Copperman.
Fantastic. It's also interesting because I can tell that on StreamYard, I'm like right in line with you, but then it looks like on YouTube, I might be a little lagging. So here we are. We're learning. We're learning together. It's okay. I'll at least be able to talk to you. And if nothing else happens, it's fine.
Well, I was on the other one, and I was talking with Olson, and then I saw another one come up. So I think you ran. You had 2, like one that was a future, like going to be happening,
right?
And then you might have started another one.
Yeah, because I think the way to put StreamYard on the YouTube, I had to go to the StreamYard to start the stream and then connect the YouTube, and I thought it was going to be the other way around. So.
Oh yeah, Scott and I did a sausage making party, and it was confusing. We did. We were playing with it because I thought the same thing. I thought I had to have my YouTube going, and then StreamYard, and I thought, you know what I mean. So I had to learn. We had to learn that. You know, Chad. You know how it is.
Can you hear us, Chad?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, sir.
Now I get to see behind the scenes of the stuff that you guys see. It's crazy. Am I lagging for you, Chad?
I think I'm the one lagging, but
no. I mean, I don't know.
Well, anyways.
Okay, good.
I'm gonna start.
Let's see how fast you respond to my. See, yeah, there it is. I'll be back.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna start a little bit of I guess what I wanted to start saying yesterday, which was probably the pessimistic or nihilistic or the evil sides of this like story idea. And so I wanted to talk about this with like 5 different examples, or like 2 stories and then 3 other examples. So, first things first, when it comes to stories, I feel like something that someone said the other day, I think it was like Teo was talking about how we are embodied stories. And I thought that that was absolutely beautiful. And so the story I wanted to tell was of my grandmother and how growing up, her and I were extraordinarily close. It was just me and my older sister. And then my grandmother, like we were her only grandchildren. And so she obviously spoiled us rotten, but in the best way. And I had this image of my grandmother being like the one that loved us so deeply and was like the nicest, most generous woman I've ever met in my life. And just like this little Southern lady that always was like dressed to a T, always had her nails done, like, but could also bowl like 130 game at the age of like 75, like cool woman, such a cool woman. But as I got older, I sort of learned what my grandmother was to my dad, because this was my dad's mom, and how my father kind of saw her as this very narcissistic, controlling, just almost like guilt trip ridden type of like woman. And whenever we would go to like Christmas, and we'd always spend Christmas with my grandmother, for me it was like, oh, I get to like eat my grandmother's cheesy potato casserole. That's what we had, Chad, so that's why I think about yeah. Or like all these like presents of everything that I said that I actually wanted. But then there was also this like tie-in of my father just being in the most uncomfortable state whenever we were around my grandmother. And so just as I was getting older, learning that what my grandmother was and my story of her was like not just necessarily my story. It was like the combination of all of these things. And then to add to that, when I went to her funeral last year and I met her friends and her students and her mentees, that was also like what my grandmother was all this. And we were sitting around having like, we had Dixie barbecue because that's what she wanted to eat. Like she had basically planned her funeral. And so we were like sitting around eating and having these stories almost like around a campfire of like my grandmother. And I felt like I learned who she was for the first time in my life, because I got all of the perspectives of this woman all at the same time. So that really stuck out when I was thinking about the idea of stories. Another idea is a few years ago, I watched this documentary, and it was called Forks Over Knives. And if any of you have watched it, it basically was talking about how if you eat, it was basically debunking you need meat protein in order to be a high level athlete. And so it was talking about how you could eat plant proteins and be at like the highest level of your existence, and how like your digestive system is made for like long-term digestion. Anyways, it was saying that you could be vegan and be a healthy person. And so I was wanting to try to be vegan, and you know how that goes when you're a vegan and then you tell everyone you're vegan and you cook vegan things. And I was in this time in my life where I was meeting like a lot of new people. And so introducing myself and then sort of talking about the things that I was doing, and what I was obsessed with was making vegan cooking. I was really passionate about it. And so I would be talking about it. And eventually I realized, you know what, I kind of want to integrate like animal protein back into my diet. And so I became not vegan, but everyone would address me as like being vegan for like
Well, it
a
doesn't.
2 day.
It doesn't hurt that your name rhymes with it.
Exactly. You just switch the V over, and it's
Yeah.
basically Megan. Um, but I didn't realize that I had made a like story of myself. Had them basically, I don't know, like buy into this idea of who I was because of the story I was telling. And I didn't realize how impactful that was. And so to this day, people still, even though I eat meat almost daily, like I am seen as someone who is like a vegan or has like vegan characteristics. Um, so I thought that was an interesting way of thinking about stories as well. And then something that Olson said yesterday that I thought was a good point when I brought up the idea of how the winners write the stories. I think he made a good point where it's not necessarily the winners. And I want to reframe that. If we can go back to a little bit of my talk with Michelle and Sherry, where it's almost like I think actually those that are surviving, and I think Teo said something like this, but those that survive tell the story. And then I want to make the distinction between survival and thrival, like surviving and thriving again, and how even if the story survives, is that a thriving story? Is that like what's going to be the best for, progress or evolution, or like, does that even matter? And so just realizing that most of the time, it's not necessarily a story that's going to help to thrive, but it is one that has survived time. And so how to distinguish that. And then the last point I'll make before we can open this up is the idea of telephone. And so, like, I don't know if you guys have ever played the game of telephone where you get an idea and it's said to you, and then you turn to your neighbor and then you have to say that same idea, and then it goes down this line and you're just passing the message on and on and on. And I don't think I've ever played a game of telephone in my life where it gets to the end and you're saying something even close to what the first message of the beginning of the game is. And so something about this, the passage of time and the passage of the words, just the words, can always be reframed into something else. And so just realizing that there's a potential that you could be passing on something that's not the true story. So that's where I wanted to start with all those sort of aspects of potential self-deception or white lies or exaggerations, and how that can add to a misunderstanding of the story.
I like it.
Be fair with telephone, there's some mischievous people out there that like to change it on purpose.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
That's
But
part
then
of the story too.
I was about to say, but then I also feel like for me, I don't think I was a liar as a child, but I was very good at exaggerating the story. And so I might have seen a snake on the path and gone around it. But my story was I saw the snake and I jumped over it and I wrangled it and I threw it away, the same outcome came where I saw a snake and I left, but I might have told my parents that I did 10 different things to and around that snake. And so I didn't hurt anyone talking about it, but it did put out something that was untrue and potentially manipulative or self-deceptive. So
Well, and the reverse can happen too, where you think no big deal, I didn't do anything, and then someone says, "No, man, you were quintessential," and and you're like, "What?" Sorry, Chad.
No, that's okay. I wasn't sure if I was doing the lag thing again. But yeah, the interesting thing about the difference between the game telephone and the idea behind it. So like in the game telephone, I always to Olson's point,
I bet you did.
when they talked about when like in a classroom setting, when they would bring up this example of let's play telephone, to me it seemed encouraged. that you would skew, and because that was the fun of the game, that was the story we were actually engaging in, and so there's that. But then the what it was trying to illustrate is something different, which is that um, I think what you're kind of pointing to, Megan, about like uh, embellishments and things like this. I mean, and like this kind of idea is all over the place. Um, actually, and I think it's actually like I don't think that it's some malicious person trying to skew the story or whatever. Sometimes it can be like that, but I think it's more or less that people are trying to participate in the unfolding of the story, or the sharing of the, you know. So like there's this band called Sleep Token that I really love, that I keep talking about, that everybody gets annoyed with, but like that's a really cool example of like of a model of how lore is developed, and how there's like one piece of fact that that is in the unfolding of that lore, and then everything else is built out of the fan, like fan fiction, but they don't know that. Not everybody knows that it's a fan fiction. So some people think, oh, this is what a fact about the band or a fact about the story that they're telling. But if you look for any official telling of those stories or those facts, it's not the case. And so what you find is like this is an interactive, and I think of like Vervaeke's 4 Ps of knowing, and how do the 4 Ps of knowing tie into what you're pointing at here. And I think that that's kind of how history and reality and lives actually unfold.
And some people deliberately try to artificially manufacture that fan fiction too, like it's like set up to be the thing when it never was the thing. You know what I mean? Like example, like Ozzy Osbourne. Do you remember the biting the head off a bat thing? Some of the older guys remember that, but
Yeah.
he was known for that. Well, the whole story is his agent got him in to talk to this record producer, and the idea was he's like, I'm gonna have a fake bat in a cage, and when you walk in, I want you to grab the bat and bite the head off it. And he's like, okay, mate. And so he walks in, and it's a real bat, and he just did it anyway. It's like, now it happened, but the idea is that it wasn't necessarily the way it was supposed to go. It's like this artificial thing that gets created, you know?
Sorry, one more thing on that. Supposedly, that's the truth, what you're saying. And like, I don't actually buy it. Anything that comes from like the rock stories, or like the rock band stories, almost anything I automatically place in, oh, this is these are marketing campaigns that bands would use to develop their pro publicity, and because at that time that's when pro publicity mattered, was
Mhm.
if you had like the kind of status where a profile was necessary. So I don't know, I think but in your grandmother's case, Megan, with your dad, I relate to your dad on this. And I've actually, one of the first questions I was asking when I was about to become a father was asking, what do I tell my granddaughter about my family as we grow older? Do I just lie to her and tell her that things were good? Do I tell her, how far do I go with the truth on it? And something that occurred to me recently about this was I can never I feel like I can never say anything bad to my daughter about my parents. I shouldn't do it, even though it will be probably a lie if I don't. Because what I don't want to do is set the precedent for her to feel like family is nihilistic and unimportant and something to walk away from. And so I don't know, that's what I was thinking about that.
So, what was your conclusion, Chad? What stories do you tell? How much truth do you tell?
What is the confusion?
No, what was your conclusion on the stories and the truth that you tell to your kids?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't gotten that far. I think I've been toying with the idea of fictionalizing through models, a way to tell the truth, but not tell them who it's about, maybe. Using like allegory or like fables. I don't know. I've been thinking about that, but I don't. Yeah, Megan, I'm sorry. I don't want to take over.
No. That's perfect. I guess, from my perspective as being the I guess the potential Carolyn in your situation, it's like I like don't know exactly how I feel about the fact that I feel like I was not necessarily lied to by my father. I wouldn't say he was lying, but the fact that I never really got the full story, and the fact that I knew how much pain he was going through with not telling me, I think, these stories, like his perspective. Do I think it would have been appropriate for him to tell me these things? Do I think it would have helped my childhood? No, I don't. I actually think that, like, saying, oh, like, I have a really terrible relationship with your grandmother and I like resent everything that she does. Like, I don't think telling a child that is, helpful by any means. But I do think that there's a part of me that almost like wishes I had known the truth to some extent, because, like, I don't know, I think Verviki talks about this thing where he asks, he talked, I think it was in one of his meaning crises or whatever, where he was like saying, oh, I asked all of these like partnered off people, like if they would want to know if their partner was cheating on them. And all of them said, yes, I would want to know, because I would want to know what reality is. It's like, do they want to know that their partner is cheating? No. But do they want to know what's real? Yes. And so there's like something about me that I wish I had known the truth, because then I would have known what reality is. And I had a really big like reality check moment where I was like, wow, nothing I knew was real as like a child in a lot of ways. And so that is like really, that's something I have to process now. But I can't say that what he did was necessarily wrong. I think he definitely gave me a better childhood for not. But yeah, I think that's a very interesting, like, where do you draw the line when it comes to telling the truth or keeping that from them? Yeah. Go ahead, Austin.
Isn't this the story of coming to adulthood, like in every book you read, right? Catcher in the Rye and things like this come to manhood story, or come to, adulthood. I mean, it seems like always those scales will fall off at some point, no matter what it is.
No, that's true. I mean, my dad, not that he's not my hero anymore, but like he was my hero. And then all of a sudden he was a man. And it was like, oh, he's not a god anymore. That's crazy. Like, he has flaws. That's crazy. His feelings. That's crazy. He's not allowed to have any things. So like, yeah, I guess my story of my dad changed drastically when I realized that he was just as messed up as I am. Like, it's like, oh gosh, he didn't know what he was doing. Like, he was he had 2 kids under 2 at my age. Like, I can't imagine. And he was working full time, and he was dealing with his mother, and all these things, and I can't imagine doing that. So,
Do you think it was for better or for worse?
what was?
Not once you found this out, do you think that it made things better? Like maybe, I don't know, perspective, relationship, all of the above.
Um, oof. I think in my current state, I don't know, but I think I now have the information and like the reality to then create a better relationship with my dad. I think now I have the opportunity to know him better. Do I feel like I know him right now? I don't know, but I think I have the opportunity to now. So potentially, the idea is yes,
I have
eventually.
I have some like I feel like in relation to my mother and my father, I feel like I'm two different characters in those stories. And my mother and my father are two different characters, but they're also like my dad throughout my story with my father is also like several different characters, right? And like my relationship with my mother and her character arc is like a couple different characters too. And so there's like this is an interesting thing. I've not thought about this before, but like thinking about how I become how like having conflict with my previous version of my character is still like holding parts of my father, like the ideal comic book version of dad. He's that ideal comic book ghost still is present, and I want my father to actually be that ghost still, and he isn't, and I'm trying to convince my idealistic childish self that that's not the way that it is, and like and being angry with him is okay. And then same with my mom. I like it's interesting because my mom has put in so much more effort than my father, and yet I find myself sometimes more actively resentful at her, and I give my dad a whole lot of passes when he deserves none. And like I was recently thinking about how I want to just call my dad and ask him, why are you not calling me? Why are you not calling your grandchildren? And and I want to tell him that in order for him to fully be a man, he's going to have to pay the price. And if he doesn't acknowledge this, he will always pay the price. But this moment that he acknowledges it, he will then not have to actually pay the price for what it costs for him to be a responsible father. Now, these are all stories I'm telling in my head about this situation, and the reality of the situation is, I haven't called him and asked him, and I don't think he'll ever change. And good grief, I should probably go to fucking therapy, really. I don't know what even that will do. Like that's a whole nother story that I just don't have time for.
Or just talk about it with friends on the internet.
Yes.
Yeah,
Free therapy right here, Jen.
but you know what I mean. It's like, and how many of us are actually going through this sort of thing, where we're all walking around in this kind of fluid story that doesn't know what to be rooted in. And so you got all these like, I almost think of like a big semi barreling down the highway, and there's jars of stories, and they're sloshing around, and there's like this thing is constantly on the edge of spilling over and creating this big toxic mess. Yeah.
Olson, what do you have? I feel like you've been wanting to say something.
Yeah, I got yeah. Um, yeah, Chad. I think I had, yeah, I think that's something we all work through. Kind of like as B was saying, right, there comes a point where they're not the heroes, and for some of us, that happens a lot sooner than others. Fortunately for me, uh, well, I don't know when that happened. I remember um kind of realizing like wanting more from my father than he was able to give at an early age. There's that song, this takes me, where it was like the song was, it's sung from the perspective of the dad, and he's like never around, and the boy, little
Cats
boy
in the
blue.
cradle.
Yeah, yeah, Cats in the Cradle. And I remember listening to that, and then my mom was like, "Oh, why do you like that song?" I was like, "Oh, because Dad's never around. You know, he's always working and stuff." And so, you know, even then, like realizing I was, you know, he was human because he was always working. Um, and now as an adult, I'm like, well, he was kind of a workaholic, but I have a little more grace for it now too, because there's a lot of things you got to do as an adult. Um, m- but yeah, I also had a similar situation with my parents. And I won't go into, as Chad was talking about, and I won't go into it. It wasn't about necessarily calling, but they one of my parents was professing to has professed to believe a certain thing for a long time, and at a certain point a couple of years ago, they were clearly acting in a way that wasn't doing that. They were putting something else of theirs first that they were prioritizing. And so I called them up and kind of called them out on it. And they ended up getting very angry with me and hanging up, and they didn't talk to me for like a month or 2 months, even though I kept calling and texting and stuff, trying to reach out. I was like calling like once a day just to try to like bridge that. And so yeah, I don't know. Like sometimes, like what do we in those situations, what's our responsibility to bridge that? Um, and what does that look like? What's the price we might have to pay to disrupt the status quo? Is it worth it? Will it benefit us? I don't know. Those are all your questions you have to wrestle with. And and then like for my wife, I know it's her story, but she's wrestling with something similar in terms of her parents not in such a dramatic way at all. But just you know, a humanizing in a very real way. Like you know, sometimes we'll see things that like, I thought they were teaching me something different, but apparently their memo of what they were thinking and what I was thinking are two very different things, you know. And so not to say one's the good guy or the bad guy, but they're just different stories like we're talking about. They're just different stories. And sometimes that's hard to reconcile on that. And back to like the what Brett was saying, um, and with B, like when to know, like should B his dad have let her known about her grandmother? I think there's age appropriate things, right? And I think that's like like somebody had mentioned, right? You kind of you don't want to build up resentment to that person. You kind of
Mm-hmm.
want that person to be able to build their own idea of who this is. And as they get older, you can fill in some of that back story. I think part of it is just kind of like, I don't know if there's a good way to do it. Chad, you were saying try to come up with other stories from other people. I think that's kind of a good way. You look at like what was the prophet with David? He's like there's the guy with the lamb, and then the king killed the guy and stole the lamb, you know, and David's like, that's terrible. And the prophet's like, that's you. And so maybe that might be the best. Or just as that demythologizing of that person is coming around, just like, yeah, your grandparent or parent or whoever or uncle or has a history of kind of acting in this way, and this is what's happened in the past, and you can now incorporate that into your future perception or story of that person. I don't know. That was a whole lot of stuff.
No, that was so great, Olson. I'm going to pop in here real quick before I forget these things. I think you made a really good point that reminded me of, again, going back to my like grandmother's funeral and like sitting around and hearing the stories from different perspectives and realizing that I was getting to know her almost like for the first time. Something about the fact that my father allowed me space to have my own story, like you were saying, Olson, like almost allowed for my grandmother to take up more space, to be a different story altogether. And so, in a way, I think that probably allowed even for my dad to create probably a different story of her as well, because she was seeing, he was seeing from my perspective, the joy and the wonder and the generosity and the gratitude that I was telling of my story of my grandmother. And so it probably allowed him to, in some way, whether he'll admit it or not, see her differently in a different way, with a potential of new stories. And I think that's like really important. And then the other idea that came up for me is like, I don't know, I feel like we're in this world of stories because we have all of this technology and this new therapeutic verbiage, and like everything is written down and fire hose information at us all the time. And so we like almost feel like we have to make stories of things like constantly, and we have to be putting together narratives of things constantly, and we're getting these stories told at us constantly. And I wonder if like technology was different, if we would be having the same, I know we wouldn't, but like if we would be having even close to the same conversation about these things, because like it's almost like our parents, or at least my grandparents, they never had the tools to talk about these things. Like this was never even like an idea to say like, oh, that I would have a different story than someone else, and that this traumatized me in this way and this and that and the other. And like I don't feel like this was ever really a part of their conversations. And I think as the generations go by, it's almost like we're being given the opportunity to make these stories. And just like Chad was saying, like now we have these just buckets at the age of 12 of these like sloshing stories. And it's like what is that? Like, is that helpful? I don't know. It seems a little bit overwhelming from what I could tell. So I just wanted to toss that in there as well, probably as a distraction.
I was thinking about how many times it evolves. Like, I had a one vision of my dad or my mom, right? And it was like the joyful one in the beginning. And then I got to a place like, wait, the human, what is wrong with you guys? Why did you do it this way? Why would you did this all wrong? Like what you made so many mistakes, the hindsight kid. And then there was the next level where, and it came actually through an argument. And my mom said to me, it was my first time being a parent. And then she paused and she looked at me and she goes, and now I'm realizing it was your first time being a kid. And it's like, it was like this aha moment. And then the evolution came to where I'm like, actually, they were smarter than I'm giving them credit for. You know what I mean? Like, so like this evolution of perspective is also interesting.
What about you, Andrew? You got anything? You always have good wisdom.
Sorry, I was just trying to look something up. I'll just slow to contribute because I think you guys are sharing such, I don't know, profound, like challenging stories of like family situations. And I'm like cautious to just jump in there and say this is how it should be, or this is what it should be. But I did have one example of somebody that had a bit of a challenging father, but you wouldn't know it. He was a preacher that had like really got him to know the father heart of God, and he would speak about his dad as this larger than life, incredible character, and not lie, but he would just highlight the positive elements, and at times actually shared the challenges as well. But he would look for the positive elements that could be connected with, which I thought was one strategy. And then while you were talking, Megs, I reminded of like my grandmother, and for me, she was this incredible, sweet grandmother. And as I've grown up, my mother shared about how challenging her relationship was with her. And it's like, oh, yeah, as you do grow up, you see a whole nother side of it. But similar to, I think, what you were saying now, Chad, it's like she was my grandmother. She wasn't my mother who was difficult with me. It's like she was allowed to be a grandmother, and my parents, like, to their benefit, like kind of gave me the freedom to enjoy that, to embrace that. How that applies to your personal stories, I think, just requires incredible wisdom, and each situation or each person's story is going to be so different.
No, that's fair. I kind of you sparked something in me a little bit of. It seems like what we're talking about right now is a very like individual, like personal thing, and I think the reason why is because when you talk about the stories of like my version of my father or my grandmother or whatever, and then that changes, it actually changes the story of yourself too. Like in a way, it almost like you then have to almost reframe, like when something about what you thought was real changes, you also have to like change. And so that's why I think it oftentimes is a very hard thing to change that narrative, to open it up, because then you have to define almost like yourself differently. And I think that's why a lot of times, like I'll bring it to the like religious sense, at least for me, is like a long time ago, I characterized myself as a Catholic. Like that was like part of my story. That was part of what, and my idea of Catholicism was a story as well. And then when that changed, of what I thought Catholicism was, and that like kind of like morphed into something else, then I had to change who I was in relation to it. And so I think oftentimes it's scary for me to think about what, we try to define what a Calvinist is or a Christian is or whatever is. And I loved how when Brett was saying like, this is what it is for me, because I think we like to say this is what it is blank. But as we've all been saying, like my grandmother, that's like one person, but it's also a million different people, right? Like it depends. For me, my grandmother is very different than what my grandmother was to my dad. And I think that's a similar idea when it comes to religion or God or just the relationship with. And so I thought that was a good tangent to something that you guys probably can speak more to than I can, and I want to learn about it. So pushing that back on you guys.
This makes me think of what just came to mind was like our desire for truth, or what we think should be truth, or the way in which truth is used. And so then I was thinking about like American law and statute of limitations or something, and how like and thinking about that as it relates to stories and how why forgiveness is paramount, because you know, like I don't want to be judged for my poor actions of the past that I've grown through and um, have what's the word, um, have paid the price for and cleaned up and all that stuff. Like I don't want to be so like maybe that's one of the problems with stories is like if they're not held in proper tension, people will end up having to continue to pay a price. You know, like I think that's also why I was bringing up for my dad. Like I feel like I just want to tell him, if you take responsibility and own your story, you won't have to pay for it anymore. But the longer that you don't own the responsibility for that story, you will continually pay this price. It's a weird paradox, you know? And so like yeah, I think culturally in the modern West in which we live, and our insatiable desire for what we think is truth or what truth is for has also distorted our relationship with story. And and like, what is the purpose of story? You know, is it to get to the facts? Well, why do you want all the facts? uh, you know, and what good are they anyways? To a certain degree. And so yeah.
Yeah, can I piggyback off Chad with that? I think you hit on something that's like our conversation actually right now is very Western centric, where we're talking about the story and the facts and our perspectives and things like that. Um, and to highlight that, I have a story. And it's um they I had I taught at a international school, so there's lots of students from all sorts of different backgrounds. And there were some East Asian cultures that were present, and I had a student who was that, and I made a mistake on something. Well, yeah, I made a mistake, and then and like the parent came in with the student um to ask about a couple of different questions, but one of them was the mistake. And when it got to that point, and their culture, I was the person in authority, the authority figure, and the fact that I have honor is a more important story, is the more important fact, that I would have honor and to be able to then be an authority, to because if I didn't have honor, if I was disgraced, then I couldn't be an authority over the student. And so it was more important for that parent that I have honor and keep that status. That was the more important truth, um, than like what materially happened in the world. And and so when the parent asked me about it, I was like, I took responsibility because I'm a Westerner. I'm like, no, sorry, that was my fault. Oops, my bad, kind of thing. And the parent was like, "Oh, my student should have done something different. She put have, for example, I forget what it was, but for example, should have put their name on the paper better, and it wasn't your fault, it was theirs. They should have done this better." And I kept trying to argue with them, like, no, it was my fault. And I didn't understand that it was more important to that parent that I keep the status and that I keep the honor than it was for the correct fact that the student had done the correct thing and I had done the wrong thing. And so I was talking to some colleagues after that who were more familiar with that culture, and they explained to me what was going on, and it just really changed my perspective. Like sometimes, like we talk about the facts of the story and our perspectives, but sometimes like facts are fungible in terms of what our hierarchies, priority hierarchies are, or whatever that is. So I think Chad, yeah, you hit on a good point there, Chad.
Well, this is one of the things I've been wrestling with, of like thinking about wanting to journal for Carolyn. But then when I sit down to do it, I have nothing to journal because it's like I don't know where to begin. What is what is like appropriate, or what would even be the point? Like in my mind, it's interesting because my mind will have all these kinds of like ways of kind of processing or working with the story in the background that I'm not even aware of. It's just happening, and like that's kind of like a daydream or something. And it makes sense in the daydream. And then when I try to actually just like sit down and do it, it's like there's nothing there. It's like, well, maybe the daydream was meant to be daydream. Maybe that's what it was for. Maybe it was actually never meant to be put down in this kind of concrete way that I'm idealizing in my mind when I want to do it. Yeah, sorry.
No, I feel that, Chad. I feel like I probably overuse the label of like relevance. I know it's like a big idea in this space, is like, relevance realization and stuff like that. But I think it's like, okay, so for example, like when Olson was asking me of my story, like before we started on the rando, I was like, I don't know what's relevant to talk about. Like, I don't understand what would be relevant for the room that it's going to be in, right? Because it's like I have a million things that have gone on in my life, but like what's going to actually be relevant for this context? And it's like, it's really hard to realize that we don't know what the context is most of the time. We have to feel that context. We can't like propositionally place ourselves in like the context. And so it's like, I don't know, for me, I find that like stories tend to be like sticky in this way because like anything can become relevant if you just start saying it, but is it actually relevant to the context that like we're in? And so I think I have like learned the phrase of like staying in the room and like just being in the room. Like, what does it feel to be like in the room? Like that's like the relevance. And so if, what you're writing down in that moment, Chad, like this might not be helpful at all, but like if what you're writing down feels like it's a relevance to the room and to the situation right there, then that's all that matters. But it's really easy to use stories to sort of like, to time travel, to go back in time, to go forward in time, and to like be outside of the room. And like the only relevance I can find or have been able to find seems to be in the room. That's the only like genuine relevance I can say for sure. But it's hard because we just want to tell stories of everywhere else, if that makes any sense to anybody. And if not, that's okay too, because we're about at time anyways. So this is unless anyone has anything that they really want to add to this last like couple minutes, we can sort of wrap up and get ready for some Chris Howard show. So what say you, everybody?
The one thing I'd say to Chad, I keep going over like, what do you say like to your daughter? What is the stories you pass down? And like, I don't think it's about crafting a different story or crafting anything else. And I think it even goes into speaking to your dad. Like the only thing I can say is you become the man you actually want to be as much as what you possibly can, and just share that honestly with both of them. And it's like, I've seen the way that you share a bit of your story here, and I know how good that is for so many people. And I think the more you do that is the best way you can actually highlight that and display that to your dad. I'm not saying say like, hey, you need to take responsibility here or there. It's like, it maybe sounds flippant, and that's why I was cautious to say it to begin with. But it's if you're realizing the grace that you've received and live with, that it's like, man, I know for myself, it's like when I realize the grace that I've been given and how much worse I could be, allows me to actually operate with a bit more grace towards the people that have hurt and wronged and done stuff to me. And the more that I can actually do that, the more that I can draw out the best parts of their story and maybe cover over the worst for the benefit of others. And I think that's not a lie, but maybe selecting the most relevant aspects to create the most compelling story to move forward, and be as much of a positive influence in both directions, to your father and as the father. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, at some point you realize, like, and this is so nice about having a partner who has an outside perspective, who has heard the bad stories, who knows me, and who has, I think, good wisdom. And she's like, why do you want to peel on that or pull on that scab? There's nothing there that's going to make this better for anybody, not for you. I mean, yeah. So it's a matter of, I mean, yeah, it's forgiveness without expectation, which is really hard. But that inner, the one that's within me that's more like Carolyn is like, but Dad, what the fuck? And so that's all. And it's hard. It's growing up is hard, I guess. Yeah. And my last thing is, as it relates to Sleep Token, I want a report from everybody on this stream of what they think Sleep Token is really doing and what's up with that. And I want it by Tuesday of next week. Have a great day.
Thank you, Chad.
Now, do you know for sure that Chris is streaming?
That was going to be my other question. I mean, I'm happy to keep going if people want to keep chatting. I don't want to impede on his space. I also don't know how he's doing. I would love to see if he's doing okay.
Usually, like what I was paying attention to yesterday was watching for a drop down where it said he's going live. And that always like when we're in the middle of a conversation, I'd see that and I go, okay, we got a chicken truck. We got enough
2
time,
minutes.
you know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I think, it's up to you, but it's something to consider.
If you guys want to keep chatting, we don't necessarily have to keep chatting about stories either. That was just part of, obviously what I wanted to continue on from yesterday. So if there's any other things you guys want to keep talking about.
I wanted to know what you, I was kind of curious about, I guess we kind of touched on it, but maybe pull more on your idea of the dangers of stories.
So I think if I were to go into like my idea of dangers, I think of and I think this is something that I know that Olson at least has commented on a lot of my comments, but when it comes to self-deception, so I think what stories can do is they allow for the ability of potential self-deception. So let's see if I can come up with an example. I can convince. Oh, I saw the pull down. Chris is going live. Yeah. I'll do this really quick. I'll say it really quick, and then we'll end this, and then I'll say hi to Claire. Sorry, we're gonna jump on over to Chris's show. But essentially, you can convince yourself of anything, very much so. If I can tell the story of I'm a vegan, and then if I keep that story long term, even if I am still eating meat, I can continue to have this belief and this story in my head that I am vegan. And so I can self-deceive myself into thinking, that's probably a horrible example, but I can constantly lie to myself. Well, I guess you can't lie, but self-deceive myself. And then I'm acting in accordance to this story, not what I actually believe. And so I don't know. I think that that's what stories can do, is they can direct your behavior in a way where you, when you look back and say, oh, do I agree or disagree with this? Oh, it loads onto that story. Oh, okay. Even though my body and in the room, the relevance doesn't agree with that, I can convince myself that is what I'm supposed to be doing or thinking or believing or whatnot. And so for me, it's the self-deception that I think is where the dangers of stories can lie. Pun intended, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to comment on Chad's thing. I don't know if he'll see it, but in terms of what he's leaving for his daughter, I think part of I have kind of threefold ideas on that. One, first is like that's literally what got me going into coming out of the lurk in a way with TLC and making my own videos is like, I don't know what will happen today, or tomorrow or anything. And so I don't know if I'm going to be around when my son's older. And there were things and conversations I was wanting to have with him when he got older that I wanted to make sure you would hear, like advice and things like that that I wrestled with when I was a young adult, a young male, like coming into my own. And so that's what like my first 16 videos or whatever on my channel are like. And you don't have to go listen to them, their audio's terrible, as Claire will say. And and but they're not meant for everybody, they're meant for him. And so that's kind of a thing you could do, is just the things you have, like the advice you wish you had when you were old, when you were becoming an adult, right? You could put that down. The
Try
other thing,
fathers just lecture us,
yeah,
right? I
mhm,
had a father who just lectured me.
never. So I hope it's not a just lecture. As he grows up, I hope there's a dialogue there. But sometimes you can't have the dialogue. And the other part is, this is another reason why I'm here, is so my son, as he gets older, like there will be a video record of me interacting with adults and interacting in an adultish space, and how that could happen and the things I was interested in, right? So he could more fully develop that story of me going forward as well. And then two, for Chad, like I know sometimes writing out thoughts in a certain way is kind of difficult, but he writes really good like actual stories with like characters and stuff, like that story he wrote with
Yeah.
like the people going into the cafe and stuff. Like, so maybe he's not able to convey the ideas in a propositional form of like, this is my relationship with my father, your grandfather, and it's interacted this way, but instead write a story, like, I don't know, animals or real people in a diner or whatever, like you have different modes. Or for people who do art or do songs, right, leave those tokens, um or poems or whatever, yeah, leave those breadcrumbs for the child to find along the way to help fill out that missing information. So thank you, B.
Thanks,
Catch you.
Alton.
Have a great day.
Let's do last words if we could. I would love to go and support Chris if we can. So we'll start with Claire, because you were, I know, probably want to say something, having hopped on. So Claire, you're first. Maybe. All right. Yeah.
I was called away with the other phone, but I just wanted to say that in all families you will have these disagreements, and in a big family you will find different family members who were present at the same event having totally different views of a person or an event. So, our memories are, unreliable, and therefore hierarchy, I think, as Olson was trying to say, is crucial, because if the teacher loses authority, he won't be able to teach anyone, and nobody will listen to him. And the loss of the teacher's authority obviously has had an impact on Western education and the competitiveness ultimately of the Western labour force, and the lie of liberalism, which says that we're equal, because if we have a government afraid to tell us what about things, and feels that the only way they can get us to do anything is carrot and stick, but and the nudge and the unspoken implicit narrative that we're supposed to respond to, but then nobody's really clear about what they have to do, and ultimately, we need to know who is boss, and I don't think anybody does, including the government, I have to say.
No, that's a fair point. I definitely think that, as I was sort of saying, like, that's like a good segue in the dangers of the stories. Like, we can tell ourselves what we are or what other people are, but it's really the responsibility of keeping that like feeling hierarchy as well as like the literal hierarchy in place, or else we don't really know where things lie. So I think that's a good point.
But
Brett?
also the teaching of history. I think, our government is always hiding bits of our history from us because they want to cover their mistakes, and they don't want to know certain things. And then we're forbidden to discuss certain things. And and the most important thing is World War II with the British, and obviously Israel is an Anglo-American imperial project, but the story is that the empire is doing it to protect the Jews, but of course really it's there for geopolitical reasons, and projecting power in the Middle East for oil, and these narratives are not widely understood or widely accepted, and when people try, bad stuff happens to them. But yes, it is about values and narratives and principles, and ultimately religion is the source of the problems and the solutions. That's all I wanted to say, really.
Well, thank you, Claire. Yeah, like I said, these stories can be incredibly dangerous, and it's really hard to know what people mean when they say things without that history backing it. It's like a word is just a word without the essence and the meaning behind it. It's just lines on paper. And so, like, how can we realize that sometimes when we make our stories, like, we're not taking into account all that like meat and depth behind. So I appreciate the contribution, but we're going to move to Brett now.
I'm good. I think you guys summed it up pretty good.
Awesome. Well, unless you guys take yourself out, I'm going to kick you guys out, and I'm going to end the stream, and I'll see you over at the Chris Howard morning show. So bye, guys. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Also, if Grim listens, this is an owl, and apparently that's a story too. I don't know what the story is behind it, but if you don't find it, I think something bad happens, right? At least that's the story I'm telling myself. So, all right. See you guys. Bye.